Yo, so I just got this new webcam and figured this would be the perfect trial run for it. Just got done watching the first Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie, the first movie in that trilogy. Went and saw it in theaters. Now, I'll be the first one to say that I've never really been the biggest fan of Demon Slayer as a franchise. I've always felt that the story was kind of just middle of the road shonen, which is fine for what it is, obviously. But Ufotable always pulls out all the stops, right? Been loving their work since I first watched Fate Zero back in the day. And obviously this was gorgeous. Usually probably wouldn't have watched this to begin with, but I ran into my bro earlier today and he reminded me that it was in theaters this weekend and asked me to come. So, movie night out, watching a big, dumb, flashy action shonen with the bro, with popcorn and, the cherry cola icy. You can't say no to that, right? So, first off, it should go without saying that it was obviously a visual treat. Aside from the climax of the fight between Uzui and Gyotaro, which I'm sure you've seen if you've seen season 2, the part where, Uzui has lost one of his arms, but he's still fighting and things are like only getting more intense. It's like probably the most tense the series has been thus far. Aside from that, this really was like the best that Demon Slayer has ever looked. Obviously, everyone expects good, big, dynamic, flashy action scenes. As usual, this is a perfect mix of the 2D action anime and the 3D effects that Ufotable is so well known for. But I have to say, in particular for this movie, the integration of the CG and the 3D assets was just perfect. There was no moment where they zoomed in on a character's hands and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I see the 3D, or they panned up through, an environment shot where the camera's moving up through a bunch of 3D assets and you have that moment where oh yeah, that's 3D. Didn't really have that moment. I am sure that the Infinity Castle itself probably was 3D, but there were no moments that pulled me out of it.
Visual effects artists combine incredible artistry and technical skill, toiling over shots for hours, and if they do their job well, nobody even notices it.
This was dubbed. Honestly, not a big dub guy, but thought it was pretty good. There were some performances by certain characters which were especially cheesy, and there were certain lines that kept coming back that just had that really stilted feel that you often get out of anime dubs. But overall, as a massive sub purist, I thought this was a pretty good dub. So the actual contents of the movie, as will be no surprise to especially anyone who's read this part of the manga as I had, the contents of the movie are essentially literally fight scenes and emotional flashback scenes, and that is it. That is all that is in this movie, and really, let's be honest, that's all it really needed to be.
I'll allow it.
I thought they'd done a really good job with that. Once again, as someone who's read this part of the manga, I kept wondering, this is supposed to be a trilogy. The movie's 2.5 hours long. They gotta be expanding some things a lot, and clearly they did. The big fight with Akaza, which was, kind of the centerpiece of the movie, the centerpiece with all the set pieces, the biggest, flashiest, longest uncut shot in the entire movie was it. I mean, it felt like it was 45 minutes long, just, tagging in back and forth between Tanjiro and Giyu to fight Akaza as he continued pulling out all of these new moves as the fight progressed. It was a sight to behold, no doubt. And obviously I think that this was the most intentional part in the movie to, be expanded upon. I know everyone loves Akaza. Everyone has been waiting on the moment where, we come back around to see the moment where Rengoku is avenged and all this stuff, and they made all of that very satisfying. Also, the expansion of his freaking emotional flashback. Wow. I won't lie, right there at the end of it all, I was starting to feel that feeling of, okay, it's went on a bit long, but, the first 30 minutes or so of the big emotional flashback, I was really starting to feel it in a way that, I felt the emotional core of this arc when I was reading the manga, but it really hit me in a different way for the anime. And then there are so many contributors to that. I mean, the voice acting, the music. Oh yeah, by the way, the music, the variety in the soundtrack for this one. Like, there were big emotional strings and pianos. There were like wild, like cyberpunk, Mortal Kombat-esque, fight music pieces that really stuck out. There was a lot of really good traditional, conventional sort of orchestral pieces that really sold, the different moods throughout the movie. But back to the actual, extended flashback scene, the biggest one in the movie. They really done a great job of making the emotional core of Akaza's flashbacks and, all of the different things that he had been through in his past. Really something that was well sold. Even if it's kind of like, in a sense, you could argue it's like an ass pull on top of an ass pull, if you know what I'm saying.
You know what I'm saying?
They done a great job of selling it, through the music, through the animation, through the particularly good voice casting, the relationships between the different characters in the flashbacks, and all the little parallels, the intensity of the different emotions. Like, on one hand, you've got the incredibly sad, emotional flashback, and you've also got this like animalistic rage in like the present time. Like the way that those things contrasted each other, really well done. Overall, the sort of moment to moment pacing and structure of everything, I'm pretty sure that things were rearranged. I'm going off memory here. I feel like this was definitely a different order, and that felt very intentional. Like, obviously they were going to save the big thing that everyone was waiting for the climax of the movie. This did make one of the other especially important fights feel a bit short-lived. I shouldn't spoil anything, but like the first fight that happens in the movie, I won't spoil anything just in case you haven't actually read the manga, you don't know what's going to happen, you haven't spoiled yourself for this already somehow, but there's a big scene at the very beginning of the movie which leads to some pretty big repercussions, which are incredibly important in the manga and here, but in the movie, have to admit, it came so early in that I do think that dampened the emotional weight of that moment. And as long as I'm on that topic, since I forgot to bring it up in the original recording, there is one other thing that kind of miffed me about this. Obviously, they rearranged things a bit and they expanded things out. The movie is 2.5 hours long, and therefore the events have a ton of room to breathe, and yet they still off-screened the little bit of the fight back and forth between Kanao and They did the same thing in the manga, but I kept thinking for sure in this movie, given that it's 2.5 hours long, they're at least gonna give a couple extra minutes to her, right? But no, they still done the same thing, which just, it feels like a big missed opportunity to give her a little bit of fighting fan service here, but oh well. Other than that though, the way that they seem to rearrange things, the way that they expanded both the fights and the emotional flashbacks was really well done. One thing that I really liked as well is they had all these little additional, fan service cuts, not like not like sexy fan service cuts, but like action fan service cuts for a lot of the side characters who didn't get like big moments in this portion of the source material in the manga. Like, they cut back to all these different, sets of the Hashira who were traveling throughout the Infinity Castle, gave them their little moments to shine, even if they were just like, wiping mobs, like they still got their impressive little animation pieces as they showed off like a new move, a new breathing form technique or whatever. And also, characterizing them, the way that they interacted with each other in areas that you didn't get to see in the material in the manga. It felt very genuine, very in character. It didn't feel like filler in the way that you would often think of it. And on top of that, characters who are significantly more unimportant in the grand scheme of things, such as I can't remember what these guys are called, but there's a little squad of, they're like the foot soldiers. I can't remember what they call these guys, but they have like really, they either have almost no combat experience or they have like the most basic grasp of the breathing techniques, and they gave them their little moments to shine to show you that all of these different forces are working at the same time in coordination. They also had all these little pop back scenes to The characters like drawing out and trying to map the Infinity Castle within the communication. I'm pretty sure this was fairly well expanded, really showed us how much work and effort they were putting in. But back to the sort of foot soldiers who are in here, they got a lot of moments to shine. Like there was one really cool moment where the group shows up to save, not save, but they're handling the lightweight for a pair of the Hashira and letting them know that they can move on. And you see this really cool moment where obviously like they're not strong enough on their own to take out one of these big souped up demons, so they have to coordinate with each other to like slice from each side to cut off the head of this big like supersized demon. There was also a really cool moment where I don't remember this dude's name, but there's this foot soldier that keeps coming back, like he's met Tanjiro multiple times throughout the story. He comes back and he's like getting into an argument with the medicine woman's partner while they're like treating Zenitsu, and he has this little moment where he finally pulls out like an actual water breathing technique. It's water breathing form 2, I think. It's what is it called? I just remembered, water breathing form 2 water wheel. Like he pulls this off, and it's like all that he can do to pull off this one move, and it's such a damp attack. It's still enough to take out this one like mid-sized mob of a demon, but like his water breathing form 2 water wheel is like this little limp-wristed damp thing. Like you see this little like flat blue effect that comes out of it, and it's just enough to chop off the demon's head. And then just a few minutes later, they cut back to Giyu and Tanjiro fighting against Akuza, and Giyu does the same move. And this was definitely intentional, the way that they paralleled these two scenes so close together. He pulls off the same water wheel, and it's like the flashiest thing, one of the flashiest things you've seen in the movie so far. Really nice parallel, and once again, just to give these little comic relief moments and to help characterize these foot soldiers, to help show the way that all of the characters are working in coordination, all the little messages that are coming from the crows flying throughout. Really cool ways of expanding us. Once again, not that much manga source material was really adapted here. I want to say we got through 2 major fights and like a couple of little side events throughout, and that's really all it covered. Still 2.5 hours long, but for the most part that felt natural. It didn't feel like it was totally full of fluff, with the one drawback to that being that, as usual, and this is a typical thing that I've complained about in Demon Slayer in the past, as usual there is like a lot of repeated dialogue. Like characters will repeat a phrase over and over and over and over again. Like one character will explain the situation that they're in, and then another character will come and explain and explain the situation all over again in basically the same way. There's also this moment where like Tanjiro's trying to figure out this new technique, and he just keeps uttering these individual phrases over and over and over again while he's trying to figure something out, and he just keeps saying, "Invisible world, the invisible world, the invisible world." And not gonna lie, one of the cheesiest things I've ever heard. Busted out laughing. Once again, just one more of those things that does continue to be a minor issue throughout. Just really repetitive dialogue to the point that sometimes it feels strenuous and sometimes just so cheesy that for me personally couldn't help but just bust out laughing. Like there was a point at which he kept saying "invisible world" and I was just cackling like a hyena, and I don't think that was how I was supposed to respond. Personally, I did think there was a really good emotional core and pathos that was there for the flashback scenes and the emotional moments, and some of the like death scenes throughout. These did work really well for me. Didn't find myself personally tearing up for any of these, but they worked. And I could tell that, for the, the real Demon Slayer fans out there, not really me, but for the real ones out there, this definitely worked, because I definitely heard people in the audience like sobbing at some of these scenes, and you know, it's understandable for people who feel, you know, like genuinely attached to these characters. You know, they've been waiting on their flashback scenes because they know that they're coming. This is a staple of Shonen. They've been waiting to figure out like what is the emotional core of this character and why, you know, why they've been pursuing this goal so strong for so long. For the people who have been waiting on that, I could tell that it was obviously really emotionally satisfying, because once again, I straight up heard people crying in the theater. And you know, it's nice. Even if it didn't hit me quite on that same level, I can appreciate that this story reaches people who are you know, actively following this on that level. It's you know, it's nice to see a lot of people, you know, busting out laughing on the other end of the spectrum at the jokes, and I felt it too at moments. There were some moments throughout the movie where the visual comedy was, you know, it was just what it needed to be. Even if it wasn't like especially complicated, like it looked just dumb enough to sell the joke, if you know what I mean. So I don't know. Do I really want to like round this out with a number? I don't know. I mean, like as a movie going experience, a big dumb action show with some emotional flashback scenes, couldn't ask for much more. Once again, visual audio treat, which expanded on the manga's source material in mostly the best ways that I could imagine it could. Obviously, there were some drawbacks, especially for someone like me who's not that big a fan of the series. But if this movie is airing in theaters where you're at, obviously, if you're a Demon Slayer fan already, this is probably a no-brainer. But even if you aren't, you know, if you got some friends that you could go out and see this with, I would highly recommend it. It was a fun movie to just, you know, have that movie-going experience with the bro. And so, I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but you know what I'm getting at, right? You know what I'm getting at.
You know what I'm saying?
Another thing to point out, like Chainsaw Man coming pretty soon, October 24th. It's going to be coming to theaters in America. So obviously that's another reason I kind of wanted to show up for this one. I really want this local theater in my hometown to understand that there's demand for these movies. So prayers for Chainsaw Man. They've had Demon Slayer here. They've had Jujutsu Kaisen here. I believe they've had the Dragon Ball Super movie here as well. I really hope they have Chainsaw Man Raise arc. That would just be peak. Anyway, I've been ranting for about 20 minutes. I'm not sure if there was anything else in particular to this movie experience itself that I would say, but one thing that's always worth, you know, just shouting out to Ufotable. This was obviously an absolutely gorgeous movie. Honestly, one of the most well-produced things that they've ever done, as should be expected given that it's Demon Slayer. It's like their big IP. Also, just got to respect, like, when they're working on a big Demon Slayer movie like this. You can just see on AniList. I got it pulled up on the other monitor. I'm pretty sure it's the only thing, the only thing that isn't just like a to be announced so far. Obviously, they're doing the other two movies in the trilogy that are coming, but, you know, even if Demon Slayer isn't my favorite thing in the world exactly, like, the idea that a studio would grab one big IP that they really love and want to produce correctly, and then they just really commit to that one, that's really commendable, especially in an industry full of studios who, you know, try to tackle like a dozen shows a year, really stretching the industry thin in a big way. It's really commendable that they handle things that way, and it really shows when you show up for the movie. Once again, it's an audio-visual treat, and for the first time, I watched this and couldn't help but think, there's just no holes in the production, you know what I mean? There's no moments where I feel like the CG, the 3D mixed with the 2D is like a drawback. It just looks gorgeous. The lighting, the compositing, the dynamic angles, the parallax camera effects where, you know, like layers are interacting with each other independently. The way that they pull out like the interesting little light shows, like there was this scene with Akuza and Giyu fighting where there was like this wonderful like orange light emanating from one half of the map and like this blue light emanating from the other half of the map, and it always felt like it was composited just right, and it gave such a moody ambience to the fight. Ufotable is doing it right. And that rhymed, didn't it? That's probably the perfect place to end this, 'cause, once again, just rambling, but gotta start doing more stuff like this. If you see another vlog go up and it doesn't look like this, it's because I recorded it before this, so forgive me. Gonna be a bunch of other vlogs that I already recorded that are much lower visual quality than this, and 'tis what it is. But anyway, if you've been, on the edge about going out and seeing this in theaters and it's airing where you're at locally, and you got a pal that you might be able to ask, they might be interested in this, go for it, man. Like, it's a really good experience that I think a lot of us have kind of forgot. Just going out to the movie theaters and watching a fun movie with the bros.
You have to. You gotta go out. You gotta live it up, right? You gotta live it up. Yeah. Because it's almost over, isn't it? Not the show, but the world. That's wrapping up, isn't it?